Ravi was the kind of person who believed that every small action could bring a big change in the world. He lived in a quiet neighborhood where most houses looked the same, with green lawns, white fences, and cars neatly parked in driveways. To others, it was just a normal place to live, but to Ravi it was a place where he wanted to experiment with his ideas. His dream was to live in a home powered by the sun. From a young age, Ravi was fascinated by the way sunlight carried warmth and energy. While other children were busy playing with toys, he would sit on the roof of his childhood home and wonder how light could be turned into power. Years later, as an adult, he finally had the chance to bring that dream into reality. After saving money for many years and studying about renewable energy, he built a small solar grid in his backyard. It was not a giant project like one might see in a city, but for him it was special. The panels shone like glass mirrors under the sun, and every time he looked at them he felt a sense of pride. The system he built was enough to run his house. His lights, fans, fridge, and even his computer were powered by sunlight. He paid very little to the main power company now, and sometimes he even had extra energy stored in his batteries. Ravi often told his neighbors that if they wanted to try charging their phones or small devices, they could use his system. Most of them liked the idea and admired his efforts. Children in the neighborhood often came near his yard, pointing at the solar panels. They asked him curious questions. "Uncle, does the sun really go inside those panels?" one boy asked. Ravi laughed and explained patiently, "Not exactly. The panels catch the sunlight and change it into electricity." The children's eyes sparkled with wonder. For them, it was like magic, but not everyone shared this excitement. In every neighborhood, there is always one person who seems to find problems with everything. For Ravi, that person was Karen, the president of the Homeowners Association. She lived just 3 houses away, and her personality was known to all. She wanted everything in the neighborhood to look exactly the same. The grass should be trimmed at the same height. The paint of the fences should be in the same shade. Even the flowers people planted in their gardens should not be too bright, because according to her, the street must look balanced. From the very first day Ravi installed his panels, Karen began to complain. She knocked on his door and said, "These panels are too shiny. They reflect light on my windows." Ravi tried to explain that the panels were placed carefully and would not disturb anyone, but she frowned and left. The next week, she sent him a written note saying that his panels did not match the neighborhood design. Ravi calmly replied that he had permission from the city and everything was legal. Karen was not satisfied. Whenever Ravi painted his fence, Karen said the color was too dark. If he left his trash can outside for a few minutes longer than others, she complained. Ravi often smiled and said nothing. Deep inside, he believed that people like Karen were unhappy because they wanted control over everything. He decided not to argue and instead focused on his work. Ravi's daily routine was simple. He woke up early in the morning, stood in his garden, and looked at the rising sun. The golden light touched his panels, and he enjoyed the thought that this light would soon become the energy that powered his home. He worked on maintaining the system, checking wires and cleaning the panels. After that, he went to his small workshop where he repaired electronic items for a living. He was not rich, but he was content. Sometimes in the evenings, neighbors would gather outside and talk. Ravi would join them and share stories about solar energy. Many of them were curious, asking how much money he saved and if it was really possible to run an entire house this way. Ravi explained everything in simple terms, making them realize that clean energy was not just a dream, but a real solution. The neighbors appreciated him, but Karen always stayed away from these gatherings. She preferred to sit on her porch, watching with disapproval. Things took a different turn when Karen bought a new car. It was a white Tesla, shiny and smooth, and she showed it off to everyone. She often stood beside it, talking loudly about how advanced it was, how it represented the future, and how it was better than any normal car. Some neighbors admired it, while others simply nodded politely. Ravi had no interest in showing off, but he respected her choice. One afternoon, Karen walked over to Ravi's house while he was adjusting his inverter. She looked at the panels, then at him, and said, "You have this solar system, right? My Tesla needs charging. Why don't you let me plug it in?" Ravi looked at her a little surprised. He explained gently, "My system is mainly for my house. It is not built for such a big car battery. It may not work well." Karen crossed her arms and said, "It is just electricity. If your panels can run a fridge, they can run my car. Be a good neighbor and help." Ravi was silent for a moment. He did not like the way she demanded it, but he also did not want to start a fight. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Okay, you can try, but please be careful and do not leave it for too long." Karen smiled for the first time, though her smile looked more like victory than gratitude. She brought her Tesla and plugged it into Ravi's system. For a while, everything seemed fine. The car began to charge and Karen looked satisfied. She left it connected for about an hour, then drove away. The next day, she came again. This time, she left her car charging longer. Ravi noticed the power meters moving strangely, but he allowed it, thinking it would not happen often. The third day, however, something felt different. As Karen left her car plugged in, Ravi saw the system heating up more than usual. The wires grew warm and the inverter made a low humming sound. He rushed and disconnected the cable. Karen came out of her house just then and shouted, "What are you doing?" "You stopped my car from charging," Ravi explained patiently. "The system cannot handle such a heavy load." "It is dangerous," Karen's voice rose. "You are just jealous because I have a Tesla. You don't want me to use clean energy like you. Admit it." Her words echoed in the street. Some neighbors looked out of their windows, curious about the noise. Ravi stayed calm and replied, "I am only thinking of safety. Please do not connect your car again. My system is not designed for it." Karen glared at him, then stormed back to her house. Ravi sighed, knowing that this was not the end. He could sense that she would cause more problems in the future. He went back inside, but his mind was not at peace. That night, as he sat by his window, Ravi looked at the panels glowing softly under the moonlight. He thought about his journey, about how much he had worked to build his dream and how one person could make it so stressful. He wondered if kindness was always the right choice. Maybe he should have refused firmly from the start, but he also believed that truth always found its way. Ravi closed his eyes and promised himself that no matter what happened, he would not let anyone take away his peace. He trusted that the sun, which rose every morning without fail, would always be on his side. What Ravi did not know was that this small conflict with Karen was only the beginning. The real storm was still waiting, and soon the entire neighborhood would be watching when sparks turned into flames and words turned into accusations. Ravi's days continued in the same rhythm after the argument with Karen, but something in the air felt different. The neighborhood looked the same from the outside: lawns trimmed, mailboxes standing neatly in line, children riding bicycles on the sidewalks, but beneath that calm appearance, a small wave of tension was slowly building. And at the center of that tension were Ravi's solar panels and Karen's Tesla. Karen's car had become the new star of the neighborhood. Every morning she polished it until the white paint gleamed like a mirror. Every evening she parked it at an angle where everyone walking past could see it. People were polite, nodding and saying, "Nice car," though some secretly rolled their eyes at how much she boasted. One Sunday morning, Ravi was outside, watering his plants near the fence, when he heard Karen's voice echo across the street. She was showing her car to a couple visiting her house. Her tone was filled with pride. "This is the future," she said loudly, making sure even distant ears could hear. "It doesn't need gas. It doesn't make smoke. It's pure technology. And the best part is it can run on sunlight too. Well, at least when my neighbor finally agrees to be more cooperative." Ravi paused with the hose in his hand. He did not turn to look at her, but his heart sank a little. He realized she was speaking about him in front of strangers. The couple chuckled politely, but Ravi felt a sting. He had never wanted attention or conflict. All he wanted was to live peacefully, but peace was becoming harder to keep. Later that afternoon, as Ravi adjusted his inverter, he heard the familiar sound of a car door closing. He looked up and saw Karen walking toward him, keys in hand. "Ravi," she said with a tone that pretended to be friendly, "I need to charge my car again. I'm going out tonight, and I don't want to waste time at a public charging station. Since you have this big solar system, I think it's only fair you help." Ravi wiped his hands and looked at her calmly. "Karen, I told you before the system is not made for such a big battery. It can damage the wires, or worse, it can cause a fire. Please understand." Karen tilted her head and gave a thin smile. "You worry too much. Technology is strong. Your panels will handle it. Just let me plug in for a while." Ravi shook his head. "It is not about worrying. It is about safety. I can let you charge your phone or small items, but not your car. Karen's smile disappeared instantly. So that's how it is. You want to keep your energy all to yourself. You don't care about helping your neighbors. You don't want others to enjoy clean energy like you do. Ravi took a deep breath, trying not to lose patience. Karen, I am not against helping, I am against damage. Please respect that. Without another word, Karen turned and walked back to her house, her footsteps heavy. Ravi knew the matter was not over. For the next 2 days, things stayed quiet. Ravi repaired some old radios in his workshop, cleaned his panels, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in his heart. But on the third day, trouble knocked again. That morning, Ravi had gone to the market. He returned home carrying groceries, only to freeze in shock as he reached his gate. There, in his backyard, stood Karen's Tesla, plugged directly into his solar system. The cable stretched from his inverter to her car without his permission. Ravi dropped the grocery bags on the porch and rushed inside the yard. The inverter lights were flashing in warning, and the wires felt warm under his touch. His heart raced. He quickly pulled the cable out, disconnecting the car. Just then, Karen appeared from her driveway, arms folded. "Why did you stop it?" she shouted. "I was finally getting a good charge." Ravi looked at her, trying to keep his voice steady. "Karen, you cannot do this without asking. It is dangerous. Look at the wires, they are overheating." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Overheating? Please, you just don't want me to use your precious solar power. Admit it, you're selfish." Neighbors were starting to notice the noise. Curtains moved, doors opened slightly, and curious eyes peeked out. Ravi felt their stares but kept his voice calm. "This is not about selfishness," he said firmly. "This is about limits. My system is not a charging station. If you continue, you will damage it." Karen's face turned red. "You're trying to embarrass me in front of everyone. You don't respect me as the HOA president. But let me tell you, I have rights in this neighborhood and I won't be treated like this." With that, she stomped back toward her house, leaving Ravi surrounded by murmurs from neighbors. Some of them gave him sympathetic looks, while others shook their heads nervously, not wanting to get involved. That evening, Ravi sat on his porch staring at the horizon. The sun was setting in soft orange colors, but he could not enjoy the beauty. His mind replayed the day's events. He wondered how long this battle would continue. He had been patient, polite, and reasonable, yet Karen refused to listen. The next morning, Ravi decided to take precautions. He locked his inverter box and kept the keys with him. He also placed a small note on it that said, "Private system, not for vehicle charging." He hoped this would make things clear. For 2 days, things were peaceful. Ravi began to think maybe Karen had understood. But on the third evening, while he was fixing a fan in his workshop, he heard a loud knock on his door. He opened it to see Karen standing there holding the note he had left. Her eyes were sharp. "What is this supposed to mean? Are you trying to insult me?" Ravi sighed. "No, Karen, it is just a reminder. The system is not for cars. I want to avoid accidents." Karen raised her voice. "Accidents? You're just afraid of me using your power. Everyone in this street knows you don't want to share. You act like you're better than us because of your panels, but you're not." Ravi's patience was wearing thin, but he still spoke softly. "Karen, please. This is not about who is better. It is about safety. If you cannot respect my decision, then please do not come here again for this matter." Karen's lips tightened. She turned without answering and walked away. Ravi watched her leave, his heart heavy with worry. He had tried everything, logic, kindness, and warnings, but nothing seemed to change her mind. That night, rain fell softly, tapping against the windows. Ravi lay awake in bed, thinking about the growing conflict. He wished life could be simple again, when neighbors laughed together and shared tea on porches. But now, every day felt like walking on thin ice. He did not know that the real test was just around the corner. The events of the next weekend would change not only his life, but also the peace of the entire neighborhood. Because when fire and accusation enter a quiet street, nothing remains the same again. Saturday mornings in Ravi's neighborhood were usually calm. The street stayed quiet except for children playing with small balls and bicycles. Some families washed their cars while others trimmed their hedges or sipped tea on their porches. It was the kind of peaceful routine that made people feel safe and at home. That Saturday, however, peace was about to be broken. Ravi had gone early to the city market to buy some vegetables, spare wires, and a few small tools he needed for his workshop. He enjoyed going to the market because it gave him time to observe life outside the walls of his neighborhood. By the time he finished shopping, the sun was high in the sky, and he felt eager to return home and prepare a simple lunch. As he turned onto his street, he noticed a thin trail of gray smoke rising in the distance. At first, he thought someone was burning dry leaves, but as he drove closer, the smoke grew thicker, darker, and more alarming. His heart began to pound. It was coming from the direction of his own house. He parked his small car in a hurry and ran toward his backyard. The sight that met his eyes froze him in shock. Karen's Tesla was parked dangerously close to his solar grid. Flames flickered beneath the car's hood, spreading quickly toward the sides. The smooth white paint was already blistering from the heat. Black smoke curled into the air, filling his lungs with a bitter smell. The cable from his inverter was still attached to the car, its insulation melting under the heat. For a second, Ravi stood completely still, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then instinct took over. He threw down his grocery bags, rushed to the water hose, and turned it on full. The stream of water hit the burning spots, hissing loudly as the flames fought back. His hands shook, but he kept aiming the hose steadily. Neighbors rushed out of their houses, alarmed by the smoke and shouting. Some brought buckets of water. Others tried to help by pulling back bushes so the fire would not spread. Children were quickly sent inside by worried parents. The whole street was now alive with noise and panic. Ravi's heart raced as he sprayed water over the burning car. The fire sputtered, but it was not easy to put out. Electric fires were tricky, and though the water slowed it down, the smoke still rose heavily. Sweat rolled down his forehead, mixing with the mist from the hose. Finally, after long minutes that felt like hours, the fire weakened and then died, leaving behind a blackened, ruined shell of Karen's Tesla. The car that once gleamed like a jewel now stood scarred, its body twisted and burned. The smell of smoke lingered in the air, stinging everyone's noses. Karen arrived at that very moment. She had been out on a walk with a friend and came running when she saw the smoke. The moment her eyes fell on her car, she let out a loud cry. "My car! What have you done to my car?" She screamed, her voice filled with fury and disbelief. Ravi turned to her, exhausted but calm. "Karen, I didn't do anything to your car. It caught fire because it was connected to my solar system without permission. I told you before this could happen." Karen's face twisted in anger. "You liar. You hated me from the beginning. You hated my car. You destroyed it on purpose. You set it on fire because you couldn't stand to see me drive it proudly." Her words spread through the crowd like sparks. Neighbors murmured to one another, some shaking their heads, others frowning. They had seen Ravi battling the flames with his own hands. They knew he had risked himself to stop the fire. But Karen's voice was loud, and her accusations sharp. Ravi raised his hand slightly to quiet the crowd. "Everyone here saw what happened. The system was overloaded. I came home and found the car already burning. I tried to save it, but Karen was not listening." She stepped closer, pointing her finger at him. "No, you wanted this. You're jealous. You think your panels make you special, but they don't. You are nothing but a troublemaker in this neighborhood." Her voice broke with emotion, but her anger only grew stronger. Tears shone in her eyes, though they were tears of rage, not sorrow. The burned car behind her stood as a painful reminder of her loss, and she needed someone to blame. Ravi looked at her with calm sadness. He did not reply to her harsh words. Instead, he turned to the neighbors. "You all know I warned her before. I said it was not safe. I even locked the inverter, but she must have opened it somehow. Please tell the truth." Some neighbors nodded quietly. A man named Daniel, who lived across the street, stepped forward. "I saw her car plugged in this morning. Ravi wasn't home then. He is telling the truth." Another neighbor, Maria, added, "We all saw him fighting the fire. He tried to save it. If he wanted to destroy it, he would have done nothing." But Karen refused to accept their words. "You are all against me," she cried. "You don't understand what it feels like to lose something precious." The tension grew heavier. Ravi wanted to calm her, but he knew words would not help anymore. Her pride, her anger, and her loss were too deep. Sirens suddenly cut through the noise. Someone had called the fire department, and soon a red fire truck pulled up. Firefighters rushed in, checking the car, the grid, and the surroundings. By then, the flames were already out, but they inspected carefully to make sure nothing would ignite again. One of the firefighters approached Ravi. "Was this vehicle connected to your solar system?" he asked. Ravi nodded. "Yes, but not with my permission. I told her it was unsafe. I just returned home and found it burning." The firefighter glanced at Karen, who stood with her arms crossed tightly. "Ma'am, car batteries can be very dangerous if charged with systems not designed for them." "This could easily be the cause." Karen did not answer. She looked away, still trembling with anger. The fire truck eventually left, leaving behind silence heavier than smoke. Neighbors drifted back to their homes, whispering about what had happened. Some gave Ravi sympathetic looks. Others avoided eye contact, not wanting to get caught between him and Karen. As the street grew quiet again, Karen turned to Ravi one last time. Her voice was low but filled with venom. "This is not over. You will pay for this." She walked away, leaving Ravi standing near his blackened fence, his heart heavy but his conscience clear. He had done everything he could to prevent this, and when the disaster happened, he had fought to protect her property. But none of that mattered to Karen. She needed someone to blame, and she had chosen him. That night, Ravi sat alone on his porch. The air still smelled faintly of smoke. He looked at the stars above, bright and silent, and wondered how things had reached this point. He remembered the first day he installed his panels, the joy he felt, the hope that clean energy would bring peace and inspiration. Now those same panels had become the center of anger and accusation. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "I did the right thing. I know the truth." But deep inside, he also knew Karen was not finished. The fire was only the beginning of something larger. She had lost her car, and her pride was wounded. People like her did not forgive easily. Trouble was on its way, and Ravi would need more than patience to face it. The morning after the fire, Ravi hoped the neighborhood would return to its usual calm. He watered his garden as he always did, trying to enjoy the soft breeze. Birds chirped from the trees, and children's laughter carried faintly from down the street. Yet beneath this ordinary scene, Ravi's heart carried a weight. Karen's burned Tesla still sat in her driveway like a silent witness. Its twisted metal and blackened paint were a constant reminder of the incident. Ravi avoided looking at it, though it was impossible to ignore. He had saved what he could, but the car was beyond repair. He thought the matter would settle with insurance. But Karen had other plans. By noon, the quiet was broken by Karen's angry voice. She stood in her front yard, speaking loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "He did it on purpose. He hated my car. He couldn't stand me having something better. So he set it on fire. I'm calling the cops." Neighbors gathered, whispering among themselves. Some shook their heads, unwilling to believe her story. Others stayed silent, not wishing to be involved. Ravi remained in his backyard, listening, his face calm though his heart pounded. Not long after, the sound of sirens echoed down the street. A police car pulled up, lights flashing. 2 officers stepped out, their presence making the quiet neighborhood feel like a stage for something serious. Karen hurried toward them, waving her arms dramatically. "Officers," she cried, pointing at Ravi's house. "That man burned my Tesla. He connected it wrong, or maybe he even started the fire himself. He's jealous, and he wanted to hurt me." The officers looked at her, then at Ravi, who walked forward slowly, his hands open to show calm. "Good afternoon, officers," he said politely. "I think there has been a misunderstanding. May I explain?" The taller officer nodded. "Go ahead." Ravi spoke clearly. "Karen used my solar system without my permission. I warned her before that it was not safe to charge her car with it. Yesterday I returned from the market and found the car already burning. I grabbed a hose and tried to put out the fire. Many neighbors saw this." The shorter officer took notes while the taller one asked, "So you're saying she plugged it in without asking you?" "Yes," Ravi replied, "and I disconnected it as soon as I saw the danger. But by then the fire had already started." Karen jumped in quickly, her voice sharp. "Don't believe him. He hated me from the beginning. He told me not to use his panels, but that was only because he didn't want me to enjoy the same clean energy. He is jealous. This was not an accident." The officer raised his hand. "Ma'am, please let him finish." Karen folded her arms but muttered angrily under her breath. The taller officer turned to the crowd of neighbors now standing nearby. "Did anyone see what happened?" A man stepped forward. It was Daniel, who lived across the street. "Yes, officer. I saw Karen plug in her car that morning. Ravi wasn't home then. When he came back, he ran straight to the fire and tried to put it out." Maria, another neighbor, added softly, "I saw him too. He worked so hard with the hose. If he wanted to destroy the car, he wouldn't have risked himself to fight the flames." The officers listened carefully. Karen grew more restless, her face red. She shouted, "They're all lying. They're protecting him because they don't like me." The shorter officer looked at her firmly. "Ma'am, please calm down. We are gathering facts. Accusations must be supported by evidence." The taller officer examined Ravi's solar inverter and the wires, now damaged from the heat. He crouched to inspect them, then stood up. "It's clear this system wasn't designed for a large vehicle battery. Overload is the likely cause. It doesn't look like intentional damage." Karen's eyes widened. "You're taking his side? He ruined my car and you're calling it an accident?" The officer replied calmly, "We are not taking sides. We are looking at facts. Right now there is no evidence of arson. This appears to be an electrical accident." Karen's shoulders stiffened. She turned her glare toward Ravi. "This is not the end. I'll take this to the HOA. I'll make sure you're punished." The officers sighed. They handed Ravi a small slip of paper with their contact details. "If either of you remembers anything more, call us. For now, this is not a criminal matter. It will have to be settled through insurance and, if necessary, through civil discussion." The police car drove away, leaving the street quiet once again. But the silence was heavy, filled with unspoken words. Neighbors drifted back into their homes, though many glanced at Ravi with sympathy. Karen stormed into her house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Ravi stood on his porch, breathing slowly. He felt both relief and unease. Relief because the police had not believed Karen's false story. Unease because he knew she would not stop here. Her pride had been hurt, and pride was often more dangerous than anger. That evening, Ravi sat with his friend Daniel, who had come to check on him. They drank tea on the porch as the sun set. Daniel shook his head. "You're handling this better than I would, Ravi. She's been after you since you installed those panels. But now she's crossed the line," Ravi sighed. "I don't want enemies. I just want peace. The panels were supposed to bring light and comfort, not trouble." Daniel patted his shoulder. "The truth is on your side. Everyone saw it. She can talk, but people know what happened." Still, Ravi could not shake the feeling that Karen's fight was far from over. And he was right. The next morning, Karen began her campaign. She went door to door, speaking loudly about how Ravi had destroyed her car. She demanded neighbors sign a petition to remove his solar panels. Most politely refused, but a few avoided her altogether, not wanting conflict. She grew more frustrated with every rejection, her voice growing harsher with each retelling of the story. By the end of the week, she had called an emergency HOA meeting. Flyers appeared in every mailbox declaring, "Discussion of unsafe solar installation on Maple Street. Attendance required." Ravi read the flyer quietly, then placed it on the table. His stomach felt heavy, but he did not panic. He knew what he would do: attend, speak calmly, and let the truth shine. That night, as the moon cast silver light over his panels, Ravi sat in silence. The neighborhood that once felt like home now felt like a battlefield. The real test was coming, and it would not be fought with hoses or wires, but with words, pride, and patience. He whispered to himself, "The sun will rise tomorrow." And with it, the truth. But he also knew the path ahead would be long, because once pride and power mixed together, no neighborhood meeting could remain simple. The day of the HOA meeting arrived like a heavy cloud over the neighborhood. Flyers had stirred curiosity, and almost every house on Maple Street planned to attend. People whispered in pairs and small groups about what had happened, each with their own version of the story. Ravi prepared himself with quiet strength. He chose simple clothes, a neat shirt, and clean trousers. He carried a small folder with documents, his solar installation approval, safety inspection reports, and letters from the city showing his system had passed all regulations. He knew facts would be his shield. The community hall was not far from the houses. It stood at the corner, a modest brick building with tall windows and a wooden door that creaked when opened. By the time Ravi arrived, the hall buzzed with voices. Neighbors filled the chairs, some standing at the back. Karen stood near the front, her posture stiff, her eyes sharp like arrows waiting to be fired. The HOA president, Mr. Lewis, A man with silver hair and glasses called the meeting to order. He struck the small wooden gavel and the room fell silent. "We are here today," he began, "to discuss the incident on Maple Street involving a solar grid and a burned vehicle. Our duty is to ensure safety and peace in this community." Karen wasted no time. She jumped to her feet, her voice loud. "This man," she shouted, pointing straight at Ravi, "destroyed my Tesla. His dangerous panels are a threat to all of us. If we do not act, more fires will come. Our homes are at risk." Murmurs rose from the crowd. Some nodded, but others frowned at her tone. Mr. Lewis raised his hand. "Please, Karen, you will have time to explain. Let us proceed in order. First, we will hear your statement. Then Ravi may respond. After that, neighbors may share what they witnessed. Finally, the board will decide what action, if any, is required." Karen adjusted her scarf and began again, slower this time but no less forceful. "I trusted that this neighborhood was safe. I bought a Tesla to support clean energy, but instead of encouragement, I received hostility. Ravi refused to let me use his solar grid. He was selfish. When I tried, my car burned, and I believe he played a role. If his panels remain, the danger remains. We must have them removed." When she finished, silence lingered for a moment. Then Mr. Lewis turned toward Ravi. "Now we will hear your side." Ravi stood calmly, placing his folder on the table before him. He spoke in a clear, steady voice. "Friends, I moved here to live in peace. I installed my solar system with proper approval. The city inspected it and declared it safe. I use it only for my home. Karen connected her car without my permission. I warned her before that the system was not designed for such heavy charging. The fire was an accident caused by overload. Many of you saw me trying to stop the fire, not start it. I have here the documents proving my system is safe." He opened the folder, holding up the inspection certificate. The paper bore an official seal, shining under the hall lights. Mr. Lewis leaned forward, examining the document. He nodded slowly. "This is valid." Karen crossed her arms, shaking her head. "Paper means nothing. What matters is what happened. My car is gone. His panels are the cause." Before Ravi could respond, Daniel, his neighbor, stood up. "Excuse me, Mr. President," he said firmly. "I live across the street. On the day of the fire, I saw Karen plug in her car early in the morning. Ravi was not home. When he returned, the car was already burning. He ran to save it, risking himself. That is the truth." Another voice rose from the back. Maria stepped forward, her hands clasped nervously. "I also saw him. He held the hose, fighting the flames. He did not harm the car. He tried to help." The room filled with whispers again. Some nodded in agreement. Others exchanged doubtful glances, but no one stood to accuse Ravi directly. Mr. Lewis looked at Karen. "You heard your neighbors. Do you have evidence that Ravi acted with intent?" Karen's face flushed. She spoke with rising frustration. "Everyone here protects him because he smiles and pretends to be calm. But I know his heart. He wanted this. He hated me." Ravi's voice stayed steady. "This is not about feelings. It is about facts, and the facts show the fire was caused by misuse, not malice." The HOA board members whispered among themselves for a few moments. Finally, Mr. Lewis struck the gavel again. "We have heard both sides. The evidence does not support the claim of arson. The fire was an accident, caused by improper use of a system not meant for such charging. Ravi's installation is approved and safe. Therefore, his panels will remain." The decision sent ripples through the hall. Many sighed in relief. Some clapped softly. Karen, however, stood frozen, her face pale with anger. She opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Lewis held up his hand. "This matter is settled. Continued disruption will not be tolerated. We encourage both parties to find peace and live as neighbors." Karen stormed out of the hall, her heels striking the floor like small hammers. A hush followed her exit. Slowly, people began to rise, talking quietly as they left. Many stopped by Ravi's side, patting his shoulder or offering kind words. "You handled it with dignity," said Maria. "You stood strong," Daniel added with a smile. Ravi bowed his head slightly, grateful for their support. "Thank you. Truth always shines, even when clouds try to hide it." When he walked home that evening, the sky glowed with colors of orange and pink. The air felt lighter, though he knew Karen's anger would not vanish overnight. But the worst was over. The community had spoken, and fairness had prevailed. Over the following weeks, life on Maple Street slowly returned to normal. Children played outside again, their laughter filling the air. Neighbors greeted each other with warmth. Ravi tended his garden, the flowers blooming brightly under the sun. His panels stood tall on the roof, catching light as always, turning it into power for his home. Karen remained distant, avoiding most gatherings. She replaced her burned car with another, though she kept it far from Ravi's yard. She no longer tried to use his panels, though from time to time she shot sharp glances across the street. Ravi did not return the anger. Instead, he chose patience. Whenever he saw her, he simply nodded politely. Slowly, the heat of conflict cooled, even if the memory remained. One evening, Daniel joined Ravi again on the porch. The two friends watched the sky darken and the first stars appear. Daniel said, this could have ended much worse. But you stood with truth, and the truth saved you. Ravi smiled softly. Yes, I have learned something important. When storms come, we must not shout louder than the thunder. We must be steady like the earth and wait for the sun to return. Daniel chuckled. You always find wisdom in simple things. No wonder people respect you. As the night deepened, the streetlights flickered on, casting a gentle glow on Maple Street. The neighborhood was quiet once more, peaceful as it had been before the fire. And though the burned Tesla would remain a story whispered for years, what people remembered most was not the fire nor the anger, but how truth and calmness had guided one man through the storm. For Ravi, the lesson was clear. The sun that powered his panels also shone within, lighting the path of patience and resilience, and as long as he followed that light, no darkness could truly overcome him.